Welcome to Lesson 3, Cell Structure and Function. Essential question: what are the different parts that make up a cell? Being unique. What are the characteristics of eukaryotic cells? All organisms are made up of one or more cells, but what kind of cells? There are two types of organisms, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are made up of a single prokaryotic cell. Eukaryotes are made up of one or more eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells do have membrane-bound organelles, including a nucleus. Eukaryotic cells can differ from each other depending upon their structure and function. A cell's structure is the arrangement of its parts. A cell's function is the activity these parts carry out. For example, plant cells and animal cells have different parts that have different functions for the organisms. This is what makes plants and animals so different from each other. Even cells within the same organism can differ from each other depending upon their function. Most of the cells in multicellular organisms are specialized to perform a specific function. However, all eukaryotic cells share some characteristics. They all have a nucleus, membrane-bound organelles, and parts that support and protect the cell. Parts that protect and support the cell. Every cell is surrounded by a cell membrane. These cell membranes act as a barrier between the inside of the cell and the cell's environment. The cell membrane protects the cell and regulates what enters and leaves the cell. The cytoplasm is the region between the cell membrane and the nucleus that includes fluid and all of the organelles. Throughout the cytoplasm of eukaryotic cells is a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is the network of protein filaments that give shape and support to cells. The cytoskeleton is also involved in cell division, and it may help parts within the cell to move, or it may form structures that help the whole organism to move. Check out the graphic. The cell membrane is a double layer of phospholipids. Water molecules and some gas molecules can pass through the cell membrane. Other larger materials must pass through the protein channels in the membrane. Describe what are the two functions of the cell membrane. Your answer should include the words protection and regulation. Okie dokie, let's look at genetic material in the nucleus. The nucleus is an organelle in eukaryotic cells that contains the cell's genetic material. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is stored in the nucleus. DNA is a genetic material that contains information needed for cell processes, such as making proteins. Proteins perform most actions of a cell. Although DNA is found in the nucleus, proteins are not made there. Instead, instructions how to make proteins are stored in DNA. These instructions are sent out of the nucleus through pores in the nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane is a double layer. Each layer is similar in structure to the cell membrane. Particulars. What organelles are found in plant and animal cells? Even though plant and animal cells are microscopic, they are very complex. They have many parts that function to keep the cell alive. Many of these parts are membrane-bound organelles that perform a specific function. Let's look at mighty mitochondria. Organisms need energy for life processes. Cells carry out such processes for growth and repair, movement of materials into and out of the cell, and chemical processes. Cells get energy by breaking down food using a process called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration occurs in an organelle called the mitochondria. In cellular respiration, cells use oxygen to release energy stored in food. For example, cells break down the sugar glucose to release the energy stored in sugar. The mitochondria then transfer the energy released from the sugar to a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Cells use ATP to carry out cell processes. Mitochondria have their own DNA, and they have two membranes. The outer membrane is smooth. The inner membrane has many folds. Structure and function. Folds increase the surface area inside the mitochondria where cellular respiration takes place. Consider, the main idea to this selection is that mitochondria process sugars through cellular respiration and supply energy for the cell to use. Check your understanding. Can you explain why the mitochondria is called the powerhouse of cells? Hey, it's ribosomes! Okay, we know that proteins control most chemical reactions of cells, and they provide structural support for cells and tissues. Some proteins are even exported out of the cell for other functions throughout the body. Making, packaging, and transporting proteins requires many organelles. The ribosome is the organelle that makes proteins by putting together chains of amino acids using instructions encoded in the cell's DNA. An amino acid is any of about 20 different carbon-based molecules that are used to make proteins. Almost all cells have ribosomes, which are the smallest organelle. Ribosomes are not enclosed in a membrane. In prokaryotes, the ribosomes are suspended freely in the cytoplasm. In eukaryotes, some ribosomes are free and others are attached to another organelle called the endoplasmic reticulum. Describe. How do ribosomes make proteins? See you next time as we continue our investigation of cell structure and function.